Where things get interesting and possibly start to go wrong is during the reign of Harold Godwinson in 1066. Harold had taken over the throne in January 1066 following the death of Edward the Confessor. During and prior to Harold's reign, 90% of the land was in the hands of the people. Each family was granted a plot of land up to the size of 4 football pitches on which to establish a farm and feed themselves. Prior to Harold, there had been various Viking incursions where Nordic tribes wanted to take the land to feed their families because it was so hard to live in northern Europe, and this country benefited from the milder climes generated by the North Atlantic Drift. Over the years, the Scandinavians had been granted lands mainly in East Anglia, but Viking raids continued, and in 1066 Harold needed to defend his lands against a force led by Harald Hardrada. Harold Godwinson was able to marshal an army of free men peasants because they knew they had to defend their land and that they, the people, owned that land. Not only did Harold marshal an army, but they were willing to follow him from all over England to engage Harald Hardrada's Norsemen up at Stamford Bridge near York. Harold's army defeated Harald Hardrada's Norsemen, but history was not finished with Harold at this point. The Romans, following the decline of their earlier empire, had reinvented themselves and even stolen the Christian religion to hide behind in the form of the Holy Roman Church, and were intent on getting their fallen empire back. It is interesting to note that the English Church predated the Roman Church by a good 500 years. I say the Holy Roman Church had stolen the Christian religion to hide behind because effectively the holy dates were modified to fit the old Roman religion. Hence, for example, why Christmas is really the feast of Saturnalia, and Easter tends to move about a bit despite the fact that Christ must have been crucified on a definite date. Pope Nicholas II was in charge of the empire or church at that time and sponsored William the Bastard of Normandy, as he was known then, to invade England, which he did at Hastings only 20 days after Harold had engaged the Vikings at York. Harold's army followed him on foot all the way down to the south coast to engage William the Bastard and his Norman invaders. The battle was looking good for Harold at one time despite the battle-weary troops, but he was tricked by the Normans into giving up the high ground and then was killed as a result of a flanking cavalry manoeuvre. Whether Harold lost an eye is conjecture, but it did make a good story. The monks at Bayeux were commissioned to make a tapestry to tell the tale, rather like the BBC or CNN of their day, and this could be one of the earliest depictions of satanic symbolism and a forerunner of pop culture. William the Bastard became William the Conqueror in polite circles, and one of the first moves was to establish just what he had conquered by way of a census known as the Domesday Book. Here he took details of land, animals and people, and he also carried out a scorched earth policy to get people off the land. Land ownership ended up with 90% of the ownership by the Crown and only 10% by the people, and has stayed largely that way ever since. The Normans imposed the feudal system, usury and taxation upon the English, rendering them serfs in their own homeland. However, the Cambrians, now known as the Welsh, the Scots and the Strathclyde Britons in Alba, now Scotland, remained free and sovereign under the original British common law. Things stayed pretty much the same under the reign of William, and then in 1100, William the Bastard's son, Henry I, came to power and issued the first Charter of Liberties, thereby securing the rights of the barons and the king, whilst the people remained serfs who were subject to the occupiers' unaccountable tyranny. Between 1166 and the Assize of Clarendon in 1266, jurisdiction was transferred from the barons' feudal courts, where justice was impossible to obtain for the people, to the royal court, which ordered a form of grand jury to be formed once a year in each feudal district to hear all the indictments of alleged criminals, with the sworn intention of upholding the king's peace. It also restored the laws of King Edward the Confessor, English monarch 1042 to 1066. More kings came and went until John the Tyrant took the throne in 1199. In 1215, after almost 150 years of unrestrained royal tyranny, King John's barons, the freemen, or more accurately the inheritors of the land stolen during the conquest, forced the king, as some say at knife point, to seal the Magna Carta of 1215. None of the articles acknowledged any rights, freedoms and protections for the serfs, who remained in feudal bondage. However, Article 61 acknowledged the right to seek justice from judges who presided over alleged wrongdoings, as well as purporting to make rebellion against the monarch lawful in the event the articles of the Charter were breached. In 1216, King Henry III, who was still a boy at the time, created the Great Charter of Liberties, known as the Magna Carta Libertatum, which adopted 42 articles of the Magna Carta 1215, with a notable exception of Article 61, which no monarch would voluntarily agree to because it purported to give free men the right to rebel against the king lawfully. The new charter effectively repealed 22 articles and replaced the 1215 version. The Great Charter of Liberties was reissued in 1217 following the end of the First Barons' War and the Treaty of Lambeth. This included an addition which became known as the Charter of the Forest. This was a charter that established the rights of access of free men to the forest, which William the Conquering Bastard had taken away after 1066. The forest was a term that covered not only woodland, but heathland, grassland and wetlands that were productive of food and common grazing. In 1225, when King Henry reached the age of majority, he was asked to reaffirm the previous charters, and he issued new versions. This time, the definitive version of Magna Carta was issued with 37 of the original articles. This was the first time the Charter became English law. The new Great Charter of Liberties included a statement that the King sealed it of his own free will. In 1227, King Henry declared that all future charters had to be sealed voluntarily by the monarch, and created into question the validity of all previous charters, most obviously Magna Carta 1215, which John sealed allegedly at knife point. In 1237, both of Henry's charters were finally confirmed and granted in perpetuity, in return for a tax burden placed on the people, which the barons collected for the king. In 1297, the Magna Carta and the Charter of Liberties of 1225 were reissued by Edward I, who set about imposing English domination upon the Catholic Scots, who were still living under their laws and an ancient unbroken royal lineage. Magna Carta 1297 was nevertheless committed to the statute book. In 1320, Robert the Bruce made the Declaration of Arbroath, affirming the Scots' ancient lineage and their passionate dedication to freedom and independence from English rule. Decades of redcoat genocides by royal decree and the merciless crushing of the Wallace Rebellion, led by a direct descendant of the Strathclyde Britons, William Wallace. In 1331-69, Edward III enacted the Six Statutes for the purposes of clarifying the previous charters. The Third Statute of 1354 redefined Clause 29 of Magna Carta 1297 so that justice was guaranteed for all men and not just free men, as per the ancient customs, rights and liberties acknowledged by Magna Carta 1215, otherwise known as the common law. So as you can see, Magna Carta underpins what is effectively our own Bill of Rights in Great Britain. In our next video we shall look at how common law has developed from the 16th century to the present day. If you have enjoyed the content of this video, you may wish to consider subscribing to the channel. You can do this free of charge by clicking on subscribe, click the bell for notifications for when further videos are uploaded, and then click on the thumbs up to show you liked it. And most importantly, consider sharing it with some of your crazy friends. Thank you so much for watching.